the recording is in progress. All right. Welcome everyone to the Seattle Java Users Group September 21st online meetup. This one here is about detecting complex code patterns using semantic grep. So you guys can see my screen or not?
Yeah, we got it.
All right. Just curious because like things blinked. All right. What is the CJUG? The CJUG is a group dedicated to helping, you, the Java developer. We want to create a vibrant community, learn and contribute to the Java GVM ecosystem. We want to create a space where there's mentorship and career opportunities and have fun and build cool things. So if this is your first time attending one of our sessions, be this, like first time online, hopefully sometime in 2022, we'll do this in person. Share the love, invite somebody new that haven't been here before, and let them participate, right? If you are curious about the community, you can always reach out to me or Nimret, or you can, if you just want to drop us a line at leadership@cjug.org, so you can get you involved. So because times evolved, we have a code of conduct and essentially boils down to just being nice. So just be nice, right? Useful stat, we're around 2,200 members. We know that in the Seattle, there's more than 2,200 Java developers. So we're trying for them to discover us. So help us get there, discover all of the Java developers that we have around. Virtual meetings for 2021, I think the way things are going, we might consider having like in-person meetings starting sometime in 2022 when things calm down. But until then, we're just going to keep being online. Logistics, if you know this, there used to be a slide that we used to have in all our presentations, but now it's easy. We also want to thank our silver sponsor, JFrog. JFrog actually help us, help the Seattle Java user group to actually have enough to have, assume credentials and help us actually be able to run this online stuff. Usually our sponsors covers things from food and some logistics. In this case, JFrog help us out to keep this, virtual presence going. So we're very grateful for them. Lastly, our two speakers, Kurt and Daghan. Kurt has been an app security engineer for 4 years, DevOps earlier than that. And Daghan is the head of ops for R2C, senior director at Cisco earlier. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and you folks can take it over. Show us semantic grep.
Thanks, Freddie. Hi, everybody. My name is Daghan. I'm the opening act for Kurt. He's the main show. So I'll go through my stuff very quick. It's been maybe 10 plus years since the last time I wrote Java code for a living, but I did do that. All right. So we're going to talk about a static analysis engine, open source engine called Semgrep. And hopefully you can see my slide. A quick thumbs up would be great. Okay. Thank you. And the best news of tonight is that we should be done well ahead of 7 o'clock so that you have questions, you can stay. If not, you can just get that well-earned beer. All right. So who are we? Yeah, I've done a bunch of things in networking, security, and MDM space, but right now I am in DevSecOps area. And Kurt, who are you?
So yeah, I'm Kurt Boberg. I'm the lead AppSec engineer at Chegg. I run the application security program. Before I was an AppSec person, I did basically SRE and what is now considered DevOps, although it was doing deployment, scripting, and automation for bare metal servers. Thanks for that, DocuSign. I am not a Java developer. I am a polymath of sorts. I spend a lot of time in a lot of different technology stacks, but I learned to be an enterprise software engineer in .NET. I'm the enemy. But my current employer has gobs and gobs of Java code, and I spend lots of time looking at factories. So anyway, that's a bit about me.
Great. Well, before everybody hangs up, we are not going to give you an hour presentation of security and OWASP 10 and all that stuff. This is a very sort of like a different theme, and the theme is that if you ever wanted to look for stuff in your code, we're going to show you some way to do that. And there are a bunch of people who have actually written a lot of patterns for performance, reliability, and other like sort of like very developer apropos checks, and use Semgrep to essentially go find those patterns. Without further ado, let's dive into it. So yes, we are a company called R2C, and we have a tool, and under some conditions there's a way to pay for it, but by and large it's free. It's original design at Facebook. You can actually go find it at GitHub. It's Semgrep. It's a static analysis tool. It helps you like run very fast and lightweight queries. So the idea is that if you have a pattern, you can immediately create a sort of a rule for it, and you never make that mistake again, or you can always find instances where that mistake is made already. And it's very fast. It's really at the same order of magnitude from a speed standpoint as your traditional linter, whether you're using something like ESLint on the front end, maybe spot bugs or find-sake bugs on the back end. It's really grep-ish, so that's why the name is Semgrep. It stands for semantic grep. Runs everywhere. Runs in the CI, in the server, on your machine, on the IDE. It's portable, Docker, you name it. So a bunch of people, as you can see on the little screen capture here, you can see the Docker pools and PyPy, Homebrew, etc. You name it. And it has a lot of language support, which is the cool thing, because it's just that one pattern environment or sort of paradigm, and then you can essentially sort of like, if you have a giant monorepo and you have some terraforms, you have some front end, you have some back end, all of it can be sort of scanned and combed through with Semgrep. Well, I have an example. I'm going to go to that. So why not just grep? Why do Semgrep? Well, the thing about grep is that it's really about strings. So, like new lines, or understanding whether something inside a pattern was a string literal versus a variable, whether the thing is actually a comment or not. So it gets a little difficult after a while to sort of like search for things in your code using just grep. And the thing that people, Johan in our team who created Semgrep, the revelation they had is that, well, the code is not string, it's an actual tree. And in fact, for those of you who have a CS background, abstract syntax trees or concrete syntax trees is how the code is fully represented in the machine. And essentially, Semgrep is an engine that can grep the tree, not the string. So it makes it a lot more robust to patterns. Maybe a good way to sort of like put all of this in action is to give you a quick demo of Semgrep. Here I have it open. Very complicated. So let's start from scratch. So here's 40 lines of code. And the thing I'm trying to say is that I'm trying to create a crypto cipher. And, I have some instances where I'm using a DES, very old, from the 70s, relegated to 56-bit encryption because of the NSA's shenanigans and, trying to keep this weak. And eventually the world's moving on and getting to the advanced encryption standard, AES, which can have multiple key factors. So obviously this is the kind of thing you want to do. So the first thing I'm going to ask myself is that, gee, if I have this, where else do I have this issue? So, I can just say, okay, so let's look for this pattern. And I'm running it, right? And I'm hoping that at least there's a hit somewhere in my code base. Okay, there's one hit. Then I tell myself, well, you know what? The name may be different. So maybe the thing that I'm looking for is a generic thing. So like, what if a some string algo had this property and then maybe here, I don't even care what this is, just like, so I have this issue in my code. Okay, well, I have a lot of it now. So my second question is, well, out of these issues, did any of them somehow in the following subsequent lines have been used to create a cipher? Okay, So some cipher, we're gonna call it some cipher C, and it actually had this thing flow into that. Okay. Okay, so let's see what happened. Yes, I have this example where I created a weak cipher. I have an example where this should have been flagged too, because here's a weak cipher, but somehow it's not flagged. Why not? It's because the actual cipher uses the other algorithm right here. Whether it's typo or not, this was actually not a problem because, as I said, Semgrep is smart enough to sort of like have a data flow architecture to understand that what goes into this line is not coming from here, but it's coming from here. So it says, hey, this is okay. This isn't the bad pattern. But it actually does show these number one and number four, these two patterns that are actually kind of creating a weak and cryptologically unsafe cipher. So this is a rule. This is one rule of Semgrep that will run with, like Semgrep engine that you can download from GitHub. And essentially from here on out, if I never want to make this mistake, all I have to do is check against this little Semgrep snippet. And I can do some fancy things in our cloud app, but I can also download this as a YAML file. And from here on out, just basically kind of keep checking things like that. So that's a very simple crash course into Semgrep, which is like grep++. And with that, I'm going to let my friend Kurt talk more about how it works in the real world. Oh, I don't want to steal your thunder. Let me figure out how to get out of this presentation mode, Kurt. And I will let you take over the screen and then take it from here. You got this.
Okey-dokey. I don't want to share desktop one. I want to share that one. All right. Does everyone see my slides?
I do.
All right, cool. Close enough. So at Chegg, the security program and often many application security programs sort of orient your approaches to securing code kind of on a like two-pronged approach or a left-hand, right-hand approach. The first one is very manual and very human-powered, and that's the researchers going and looking for bugs. And this is a combination of things like bug bounty programs, vulnerability disclosure programs, mailing lists, internal teams doing vulnerability discovery, reports from engineers, reports from QA. But anyway, so you get this steady stream of bugs in your platform. And for my purposes, I'll be talking about security bugs, but it doesn't matter. They can be performance bugs or reliability bugs or functionality bugs. And variant analysis is a really powerful way to get rid of classes of bug. And Semgrep is very good at being a variant analysis tool. So what I do in a lot of my day job is I get things from like our bug bounty program, and then I try to abstract the concrete reported instance into basically the anti-pattern, which I can express as a Semgrep rule, use that to find all of the other instances of that same bug, and file all of those so we sort of solve them at a kind of holistic level instead of playing whack-a-mole forever, because nobody likes playing whack-a-mole. So sort of sum that up. Input is bugs from internal and external teams. Use Semgrep to generate rules to detect them, and the output is Semgrep rules. So the other half of a security program is like the secure software development lifecycle. That's your CI pipeline stuff. That's your linters. That's your SaaS tooling. That's your DAST tooling. And Semgrep actually really nicely integrates with most modern CI pipelines that speak this sort of YAML-y dialect, whether you're on GitHub Actions, GitLab CI, the Jenkins, CloudBees sort of universe. I know there's BuildKite, Circle CI. This does work in Azure DevOps too, if you are burdened with Azure DevOps. Microsoft did eventually join the YAML party with everyone else. It just took them a little while. And so this is where the same tool set being used for both the human-powered exploratory stuff and the programmatic robots, making sure that everything is nice and consistent, meeting a minimum bar of security is really nice. Because in the before time, in the long ago, security researchers and engineers didn't necessarily have the same tool sets. So security consultants and bug bounty hunters and stuff have their set of tools that they use for things. And it's a completely different stack that doesn't really talk to the tool builders and CI DevOps people. And so you have to take your output from your manual human researcher stuff, do some translation into spot bugs rules or find sec bugs or whatever, and then integrate that into your pipeline. Whereas here, I can just write my Semgrep rules and drop them straight into CI and things just work. So kind of TLDR, 2 processes, 1 tools. The manual process, input is bugs, output is Semgrep rules, and then my CI lifecycle input is Semgrep rules, and my output is safer code. So this makes me happier. It makes you, the developers, happier because you get less visits from me. Everyone is happy. So this has worked out really great for us in practice. And I'm going to show you some demos of some more kind of complex, nuanced uses of the Semgrep capabilities. So my use cases, because I am a security AppSec person, my use cases are very security focused, but this does also work for things like correctness. Semgrep in particular is very good at things that are like A must happen before B. So if you have gates or order of operation things that need to happen in code, Semgrep's really good for writing rules for things like that. So I'm gonna stop sharing that and start sharing my lovely Semgrep playground. Okay, that is me playing with the, so I'm working on a C# rule for the Solarwinds Sunburst HTTP backdoor in .NET. C# support's not quite as mature as Java support, so there are some funky things that don't quite exist for C# that do exist for Java. So if you are a Java programmer, you're in luck. The Java support in Semgrep is very mature and very, very nice, and things kind of just work a lot of the time. Daghan and company get lots of messages from me about things like, hey, this PHP thing doesn't work, or like the ellipsis operator doesn't work in this corner case for C#. For the most part, I have not found anything in Java that doesn't work right. So, okay. So the first example is SQL injection. So I am assuming that there is a variety of backgrounds here, everyone from intro, junior Java devs to senior staff engineers who have been writing Java for decades. So just so everyone's on the same page, SQL injection is a class of vulnerability that is introduced by basically constructing SQL queries from string concatenation. Like string concatenation and string formatting, bad when talking to SQL. You want to use parameterized queries wherever possible, because otherwise you may take a string argument from some user, which can be whatever the hell they want. And if you're concatenating that with stuff, you can start doing things like escaping out of strings, and then badness happens, and we don't want that. So this is an example that was actually pulled from our own code base. So we use Spring, and some services use Hibernate for talking to SQL. And I found an instance where someone was creating a string query inside a Hibernate callback with string concatenation. Now, I know this is bad. I also know that I have many, many, many Java services. And if this got written in one place, it may have gotten written in multiple places. So I need a rule to go find all of the versions of this Hibernate callback that might be a problem. So I'm going to start with the fact that I know that I have a pretty standard signature for Hibernate callbacks. It's do in Hibernate. And I'm going to define my session variable here because I don't care what it's called, but I do actually need to inspect something with it later. And we're going to do some stuff in here, maybe, but I do know that my big problem is that I have a string and it's named something. And it's a string format with some string and a argument. And then some more stuff happens. And then eventually I talk to my session and I call create SQL query with my query. And maybe I add an ND, but I don't care what it is. And I return a list. And this should work. All right, cool. So we found one, but it turns out that there is a case where we can get a string format in a slightly different manner. So I'm going to use my lovely OR syntax to go object do hibernate. Some stuff's gonna happen. Actually, I think I want that to be named B for reasons that will become apparent later. And then some other stuff happens in this method, and I don't really care. Some more stuff happens, and then again, I'm doing a return session, SQL query. Happens, and that should get both of them. What did I mess up? I have to look at my notes here for a second. What did I mess up? Of course, the demo gods have cursed me. My hubris, I was like, I have a recording. Clearly nothing will go wrong. And then it almost works live.
We can cut this out.
Oh, there we go.
Second, yeah.
Plus dot, dot, dot. That's what it is. Aha, there we go. All right, so I'm looking at this and I'm duplicating some work. So let's go ahead and use our handy dandy inside pattern. And now we can just do this is kind of a contrived example, but and just do that. That should also work. Yeah, and now we're actually getting just the dangerous construction. We can also actually do, and this is one of my favorite things. So I don't know how cool Java method chaining is anymore, but some developers really, really, really love it. And a lot of times, I don't really care what's happening in the method chain past a certain point. And so Semgrep actually gives you a nice way to totally ignore method chaining. And I think this will work. So I can actually just replace a giant chunk of method chain with a white space limited ellipsis operator in Semgrep. And I can basically just throw away a whole giant chunk of method chain because I'm just like, yeah, method chaining stuff happens here and I don't really care what it is. So that's really handy for some instances. So that is SQL injection with Semgrep. You can also do some extra fun stuff. And this is a, let's see, method, yeah. So let's say we have a public type method type variable SD and so this sort of meta variable behavior is really super useful for doing things like returning messages to your user. That's helpful. I'm trying to fuse together some behavior of this that I did not prepare in advance. So anyway, that's SQL injection in Semgrep as a sort of TLDR. And now I'm going to swap back to my slides, or maybe I'm not. Yeah. So my other demo, which I'm just going to kind of go straight to, is a reverse shell. So as a sometimes attacker, I really, really love reverse shells because they're my favorite kind of bug, remote code execution. Solarwinds is the most recent famous example of this, where someone decided that Solarwinds 123 was a great password for a server on the internet, and predictably this went about as well as expected. So if you haven't seen the Solarwinds backdoor, I think it's Sunburst is the one that was in the Orion thing. They did a really great job of writing a like really horrible, just like enterprise business logic helper type thing with just like all the verbiage and the layers and layers of indirection. But at its core, it still has to do reverse shell things, which is one of the things that's really nice with Semgrep. And their version did some fanciness with HTTP DNS. This example is actually from, and can you guys still see my Semgrep instance? I know I've been, okay. So this is an example from a famous-ish GitHub, basically repository of red team reverse shells, payloads, like things like of that nature. So you'll probably see this copy pasted around a lot. So like this role might be really handy to have in your back pocket. So reverse shells need a couple things. They need to be listening on a socket. They need to read that data from a socket, and they need to send it to a process. Like if you can do those things, you have a reverse shell. So what we're going to do is we're going to look for a socket, and I don't really care what the sending to the socket, and then some stuff is going to happen.
Kurt, you had a tiny typo.
Oh, yeah, so I do. Go. And I'm going to need an input stream. Socket in. Let's say socket input stream. And thanks for the autocomplete from my sample code. Some other stuff is going to happen. And then I'm going to do, well, not that's closed. Some things are going to happen. And then I'm going to read my data from my socket. Zero. I'm going to write to stuff's going to happen.
I think you have a tiny typo too at the first while loop.
Oh yeah, I have an extra $ sign in there. All right, now this should probably, some of these are very, very slow. because when you start doing crazy tree traversal stuff like this, some of these rules slow down a lot. Why is this not working?
Oh, the input street name is different than the closed, I think. No, that's fine. I guess.
That should be right. This is available. Did I miss closing a parenthesis?
Oh, is it just available instead of is available?
It is indeed just available. Thanks, Java programmer who knows this better than I do. All right, so we do have a match there, but we're not necessarily certain that this is a reverse shell. So let's make sure that this is doing something naughty. So let's make sure this is inside something that does something like this. We're gonna need that later. And here's where my super fun ellipsis thing is, because like they might set a whole bunch of process builder options. I don't really care what they are. All I care is that eventually you call start. And then some stuff's gonna happen. And then go output stream PO is output stream. And some stuff's gonna happen. Eventually I'm gonna call P destroy. All right, cool. So yeah, Semgrep found reverse shell behavior in process P with executable CMD. So maybe you have an edge case and at, Foo Corporation, you have a legitimate use case for doing things that look a lot like a reverse shell. And you want to make sure that you're calling process builder on a specific executable. You laugh, but I have seen this. And so we're going to get in here into the fancy editor, and I'm going to try not to mess this up because YAML loves to complain about white space. So we're actually going to use a metavariable pattern here. Let's see. So we're going to use that CMD metavariable, and we're going to need to define some patterns. We're going to say pattern regex. And we're going to say it should match CMD if we're Windows or SH if we're in some flavor of Unix shell. And I think this will work, fingers crossed, unless we're going to complain about white space. Yes! There we go. Finding reverse shells in Semgrep. This probably has some edge cases. Actually, I want to stay here, where, if we're not necessarily using process builder and doing something else. But this is a good example of sort of like the nuanced, crazy behavior you can start going and looking for in Semgrep. This is a tool that I really wish I had had earlier in my career. And I'm going to do a bonus rule, which is a CVE that I filed by basically searching GitHub with the GitHub search. And it would have been so much easier to just clone a repository and use Semgrep on it. So this is the CV 2019-228. It's XXE in Apache PDF box via the XFDF, which is the exported form data field writer for super complicated PDF documents. So if you have form data in a PDF and you need to export a bunch of form data, there are certain edge cases where you can export this stuff into PDF. So if you could convince someone to open your crazy PDF and then go, oh, but you need to open this wacky form data field with it, this would actually cause XML, external energy injection. And the reason is because of the defaults for document builder, and document builder basically just says, yeah, sure, all XML features are turned on by default, even the ones that are only used by bad guys. I think I've only ever seen 1 or 2 instances of XML external entities that were actually like necessary and had to be done that way and couldn't have been done like literally any other way. Like most of the time, things like XML external entities only used by bad guys. Don't turn that on, turn that stuff off. So what would this look like? We want a document builder is document builder factory, new instance. Let's see. I wonder if I can do this. We're gonna do it live.
Hey, Kurt, the builder factory has a Y.
It does indeed. I've worn my laptop's keyboard out over the pandemic, and I think it needs a visit to the Apple hospital to stop breaking. Let's see here. This might work, it might not. And then we want to do builder parse something. Actually, it doesn't really matter what we're parsing because we're looking for unsafe parser construction. And we're actually kind of curious if this will I might be doing something that I'm not supposed to be doing with Semgrep, so we're going to find out. Oh, that's because I've got a stay here. Didn't parse his Java. Probably because I grabbed this straight from source code and didn't make sure it was like. I forget exactly what the Semgrep environment wants for. I think this will be fine. No matches, probably because method chain isn't. That does work. So I know that the ellipsis operator will capture that. So maybe method chain will work. Nope. I have a feature request.
Are you sure there's a function after the new instance to the new document builder?
So there isn't currently, but in that case, it should match nothing and be an empty string.
Oh, okay. I'll take that.
So the reason I want to do this is because you can actually simple, and I don't want and is not builder set. Can't remember what it is off the top of my head. Set feature, that's the one. And I don't ever want builder.setFeature to be called on that. Let's just put a fake method in here that's different by 1 and do builder set feature. So, that's the right one. That shouldn't match anymore. That and is not. Yes. No, no. Oh, probably because it's too verbose and is not. Let's see.
You have one too many curly brackets at the first line.
I sure do. I don't think this is quite what I'm looking for, but I'm hoping that that at least, no, that didn't work either. All right, why aren't you builder set feature?
Do me a favor, just to like humor me. Second dollar builder, rename it something else. Builder one, yeah, just foo or yeah.
Nope.
No, okay, never mind.
You know what? We'll use the fancy copy paste method of this and then fix it later.
Yeah.
That's not what I wanted. Just do the processing. And that's better. So that's, and it's estimated performance fail or fair. So it's not terrible. But yeah, getting something out of out the gate and working is pretty easy. The Semgrep community is growing every day. And RTC folks are happy to help you troubleshoot things like super slow rules. I do this fairly frequently. I'm like RTC help. I have this rule that's super great, but it's horribly slow. And then they'll be like, you're using this feature wrong and you should try it this way. Or you are matching entirely too much something like this random thing you don't actually need to care about. But it's a really great tool that helps me scale out a lot. I am but one AppSec engineer for many hundreds of regular engineers. And so just in terms of human units of time, I will never win that engagement. So I need tools to help me. And Semgrep is one of the best ones I have found to help me do that at scale. It's also really easy to teach to other people. So if I can get engineers helping me write rules, whether they're correctness rules or security rules, everybody wins at that point. It also helps with tool buy-in, because if you, the engineer, want the output from CI tooling as well, that helps me get things prioritized. So, and with that, that I believe is kind of it for my section of the presentation. I'm going to go through my slides and make sure that that is a true statement. I think there's Daghan has one final slide, although maybe not. But yeah,
you can flip that for me. I think it's just a very simple recap slide, so we don't have to switch back and forth between presenters, if you don't mind.
Yes, I'm going to stop sharing and share that slide.
Yeah, just we'll share the slides, but in case you like this, the GitHub link is there. We have a Slack channel. If you're interested, you can join and ask questions. Everything that Kurt showed you is in the editor, so you have a link there. We have a little survey. We'd love to get your thoughts. If you feel like this was exciting or missing the mark, we'd love to know that. And 2 blog posts from people who are not working for us, so it's independent. Obviously, if they told terrible things about us, I probably wouldn't have put there, but hopefully you can check them out and then give you guys some ideas. And with that, I want to turn it over to our hosts, our wonderful hosts, for inviting us today.
Yeah, no, definitely. Uh, Daghan and Kurt, thanks for the presentation. This is pretty interesting. I think what we can do is like open it for questions. I do have one, and I'm curious about this because, like, for example, I think that I'm curious. How would you handle, or does it handle, like, if you have methods within methods that are library calls? Because that's the hard problem. Like I think some of these might be obscure away, not necessarily because the pattern is not there, but the pattern is, to actually flatten out the pattern, you need to like take out the method calls and sort of like sometimes it happens within the same program. Other like I was thinking, like, for example, for processes, the first thing I would do is try to find an Apache utils that will like wrap that up for me. So I'm curious if there has been an inkling or a feature request on being able to sort of do that follow on the Semgrep on this like method constructs.
So I think from one of the limitations of Semgrep is that it is, because it doesn't compile anything, it basically is just looking at raw text. It is limited to individual files. There is, I know, some interesting work being done with taint analysis inside of individual files, but Semgrep is limited to single class files or single, basically, text documents. What I think what you're asking for is a little bit more of the functionality for things like shift left or CodeQL, which is like the super heavyweight taint analysis across like entire like class call stacks and things like that. That does require, generally speaking, it does require you to instrument a binary. So you have to sit there and actually like build the Java code and go instrument all the Java libraries so you can actually do the taint tracking from like through a bunch of like Apache utils down to your business logic layer that then talks to the persistence layer or whatever. So that is not currently something Semgrep can do, just because of how it works. They sacrificed that sort of like really, really deep visibility into compiled binaries for really, really fast answering surface level questions about just like the nature of a single class file. Like, did I construct this method unsafely based on what I know about like my project, my application context, things like that. So the way that you generally work around this, at least from a perspective of someone who is in the security space and like looks at, you know, Java code that's actually out there doing internet widgety stuff. And what that usually means is I'm going to assume that that the Apache library is going to do more or less the right thing here because it's some sort of primitive that does an operation. And what I care more about is how is that meaningful in my business context? So it's often things like, is this method missing Spring authorization decorators and it talks to the persistence layer and I know that it's a particular object type or in a namespace that's interesting to me. So I'm using Semgrep to answer questions that are like sort of further up the architecture stack in terms of, I don't really care about the implementation details of things like linked lists. Like, sure, yes, you are a linked list library and you do linked list things. What I care about is like the things I'm storing in the linked list, like, are they user data? Like, is this user allowed to go ask for this document from the database? And it's like, if they are, they have to like go through this particular method call that is the like, I am the access control engine dot check access whatever. I want to make sure that that is called before I let you talk to the data access layer. And that is the thing that Semgrep's really good at. It has been my experience through my career that lots of the worst security vulnerabilities are things like that, the like, make sure you're wearing pants checks. And Semgrep's very good at that. The like, okay, I am a method in an API controller, and I know that because I'm inheriting from the API controller base class. I'm a public method, so I know I'm user facing. So all of the arguments are user controllable. Make sure that those go through a known sanitizer before they go to the persistence layer. Stuff like that. Semgrep's great at that. And that's where most of the worst stuff is. So for like the 80% case, Semgrep is a very, very quick, very easy to onboard tool for solving that problem. If you're trying to solve complex taint analysis questions and you either have or are interested in obtaining a CS PhD, then yes, CodeQL is a great tool. My previous employer did end up buying, I think it was Semel before the GitHub acquisition. As part of onboarding, they sent me 2 CS PhDs for 2 weeks to help me onboard and write rules. So, and we did some very cool things like cross-site request forgery that talked to SQL and touched like privilege operations. It was super, super cool. But I needed my degree plus 2 PhDs to make that happen in 2 weeks. So, and they had vastly more experience with the product than I did. So does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, no, and that's the other part I was thinking, like there is probably also like when you see these patterns, most of the times that happens is you copy it from somewhere, you know, and almost like verbatim, you know, like or you know, that's for example, like looking at the process example, or other ones are like, I think that you're right, that most of the sort of like security so vulnerabilities are while it could be obfuscated because they decided to refactor things, most of the time it's probably just something that will be quickly searchable with Semgrep. So that's kind of neat. And now that there's like, what is it, like GitHub Copilot, they're gonna be Semgrepping on what is being suggested. So it's probably, if we're gonna make mistakes, it's gonna be the mistakes that is already on GitHub Copilot. So
yeah, yeah, Copilot's a fun one. But I like the researcher conversations around whether or not GitHub sneakily trained it on private repositories is a fun one, because I am certain they did and just didn't tell anyone about it because data scientists literally cannot help themselves. But
no,
there's
there's
fascinating,
yeah,
fascinating stuff in there.
That is even like, is it GPL code if you trained it in and you're just asking you to autocomplete? There's 100 questions on Copilot. That's why I'm so afraid to even like look at it. But yes. Any other questions from the audience?
I was kind of wondering at this point, how does it compare to those like language specific tools like find bugs or go sec and those? So at this point, do you feel like the rule set that's the rules that are available publicly, they're kind of good enough, or you still like recommend just run all the tools?
We have evicted spot bugs. I'm going to pick on spot bugs because this is a Java group, and also I've got beef with spot bugs. We've evicted spot bugs from our CI pipeline and are basically relying on Semgrep to do Java SAST. And the reason is because, as any product that has existed in the world for more than a few months, our Gradle process is bonkers crazy. And due to this, spot bugs out of the box, and where most of our Java code is on GitLab. So we're using the GitLab kind of pre-built analyzers. So like the GitLab Golang written wrapper around spot bugs. But they don't have all of the spot bugs knobs exposed. And you have to do a bunch of downstream configuration to even get spot bugs to work if you have a complicated Gradle process that makes any assumptions about talking to Maven or build artifacts that may or may not already exist, because all of the SaaS stuff runs in its own container, so it's not necessarily the one that did the build step. And TLDR, getting spot bugs to even run in our process in GitLab was a nightmare and a half. And Semgrep, I was like, all right, copy paste GitHub action. Well, technically I had to write the GitLab action because it didn't exist yet. but it was a few lines of YAML, and I was just like, okay, great, it works, because I know the CLI is semgrep config R2C go, and it just ran. And for the most part, semgrep does things like, hey, did you use string concatenation to build a SQL query? Don't do that. Did you like put a user string argument into process builder? Don't do that. That's the kind of stuff that where like we see the worst stuff, and semgrep is really good for that. So we have basically adopted semgrep as this is our SAST tool. It's really easy to extend. I don't think I've ever written a spot bugs rule, but I can't imagine that based on my experience running the tool, writing a rule for it is probably also not fun. So
yeah, so it's kind of a situation where like with 20% of the effort, you get 80% of the results.
yep, and that's a really good trade, especially in the security space, because 80% of great is still pretty good, and 0% of great because you can't get the tool to run is not good at all. So I would much rather, onboard semgrep in an afternoon. Like if I started as the like first security hire at a scrappy startup running in someone's garage, I would onboard semgrep basically immediately. I'm like, we do that immediately. It'll take us 10 minutes. It'll run on every PR. It'll give us a quality bar we can rely on at least a little bit, like out the gate. It's way, way better than nothing and really easy to extend for our particular application context. So would highly recommend. We are staking our SAST game on semgrep. So, and you have crazy people like me contributing back into the upstream rule sets. So who knows? Maybe it'll just come out of the box with reverse shell rules. I forget if I actually put the Java reverse shell rule in yet. Maybe. I know the Hibernate SQL injection one is though. So it's in the audit rules there somewhere.
I think on the contribution side, I'm just gonna double check that, but I think GitLab is in the process of contributing GoSec rules. So
yeah, they're also working on ESLint rules. You do have to be a little bit careful because there's a lot of R2C rules that overlap with the standard ESLint rules that GitLab is running. So I have seen some duplicates for things like dangerously set inner HTML for React. But yes, there is a lot of community contribution back into the rule sets, and the adoption is increasing dramatically every time I blink. So, and the Java rule sets were already pretty good. So.
But just to clarify that, like, because it can, if somebody's like watching the recording, it can sound like people just dump rules and then it can be chaos, etc. But if you run Semgrep and download the rules from our sort of like, what we call the registry, they're curated and they don't overlap. And we basically kind of check for quality so that they actually meet a certain bar of true positive versus false positive. So we spend time on curating the quality of the rules and make sure that they're not redundant.
Yep. I made the mistake of just going, add all the rules to my policy. And I pulled in the GitLab stuff. So there's some overlap there. So buyer beware if you're like YOLO configuring your stuff. I would start with the R2C default rule set that's very nice and low noise. And if it complains about something, it's almost certainly a problem before you go absolutely bonkers with like the audit rules. Because that's the other thing. So there are like tiers of kind of rules in the R2C world. There's like definitely a problem, probably an issue, and a human should go look at this. I tend to write more of the a human should go look at this rules because as an AppSec like researcher type person, what I usually need is, okay, I'm landing in this code base and it's 100,000 lines or 1 million lines or God help you 10 million lines. You're like, I need to go find like threads to pull at and places to start. Audit rules are really great for that because it's like, it'll give you, couple hundred findings, and they're probably all interesting and will teach you something about how the product works, but may or may not be security problems. They're just doing things that are security interesting. So those are the audit rules, and I have imported a lot of those into our configuration because right now I'm the only person who sees those. So I am not subjecting my developers to audit rules because I used to be one of you and I realize how much that sucks. So I don't do that to you guys. And whereas the other side is the rules that Daghan is talking about, that's the R2C curated, like these are the CI rules. If we see them, if we like see a finding for this rule, it is almost certainly a problem. It should comment in a PR, you should go look at it. And those are the rules you should start with. Those are the rules that all the documentation talks about. I forget, it got renamed recently. I think it's like PR2C now, P/R2C. The default rule set. It's in the Semgrep docs. And yeah, that's the one I would start with. But yeah, it's been really, really great. So
That's awesome. Any other last questions?
Yeah, I've got a question. How does this compare to like SonarQube, and how do I make a sales pitch to switch to Semgrep if we've already adopted SonarQube at my place of work?
I don't know that that's necessarily an instead of pitch. Daghan, I don't know if you have a better a better answer for that than I do. We have SonarQube for existing QA stuff. A lot of that stuff tends to like the Semgrep does not replace headless browser type testing for things like functionality and acceptance testing. Like it's very much in the static analysis space currently. And I will admit that my experiences with SonarQube are pretty limited to sort of the functionality spectrum of things where it's like spins up a Phantom.js browser and goes and clicks on things.
Now there's a code analysis part, but I think that is actually I think in SonarQube it is find bugs under the covers. So
Yeah. Well, there you go.
Yeah, I wasn't actually thinking of SonarQube for like browser testing. Are you perhaps thinking of Selenium?
yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. So I think of SonarQube as server side, run a bunch of static code analysis, give you code coverage with Jacoco, tell you if that's trending up, trending down, run, find bugs rules, et cetera, and it comes out of the box with a very similar sort of like static code analysis rule set bundled on the server.
Yep. Here's how I would pitch that to an org that is deeply invested in SonarQube. Ask them how much time they spend chasing false positives from SonarQube, and then do a Semgrep run with the sort of standard CI rule set and go, of these SonarQube findings that we actually went and chased down and dealt with and fixed, how many of them did Semgrep flag, and is that number better? Because as a semi non-invested third party, I mean, we're all in on Semgrep, but like that's how I would approach it as someone who's looking to adopt a technology like this, is go look at the tools we're already using and what kind of actual value we're getting out of that versus what is our engineering org paying in terms of like developer time and hours to go look at this stuff that we may or may not care about, and go, did Semgrep find all the P0s? Did it find all the P1s? Are you really looking at the P2s and P3s? Be honest, are you? Because I don't think you are most of the time. Like, unless you have regulatory compliance reasons to go really dig into the weeds of like the 100,000th fortify result. Like, most of the times you're squashing the things that are like, this will make us get owned tomorrow. This will make us get owned next week. and the rest of this, maybe we'll have the new guy fix it 3 sprints from now.
Now there's an interesting play that could be done there for RTC, because the way that SonarQube works is that they're plugins. So there's a plugin for Checkstyle, there's a plugin for PMD, there's a plugin for Findbox. And since this is an open source project, if there were a plugin for Semgrep with default rules, that's an easy proposition just to, hey, let's run it. Because a lot of like Java shops will have SonarQube running. We do. So
That's a good suggestion. Hey, Rusty, I want to answer you, but I want to be diplomatic and give you information at the same time. I don't want to just say words. And I want to be diplomatic because our principle when we join meetups and community events is we're not here to like basically pitch a paid product or things like that. Everything Kurt and I talked about is on the GitHub repo, open source, completely free. So this is not like a vendor bake-off where I say, here are the 3 things we're better at the other competitor A and B. So so that's why I don't want to like immediately get into like a very direct, like a comparative analysis. But here's what I'll say in terms of the thing we're trying to build. We want to make custom rule writing very easy for you, so you can overfit Semgrep to your organization. Now, for many people, it's like, who cares? And those people are not excited about it. But those people who say, you know what, I'm sick and tired of the same pattern or mistake, or like of this bug bounty, or like the people are not basically moving on to this new authentication scheme or encryption. For those people, Semgrep is really useful because they can really sort of like finally have a methodical way of enforcing that pattern. The other thing that we did as an organization, we said Semgrep can do code quality, can go after performance. And in fact, a bunch of people forgo, right, a lot of performance rules, with Semgrep. But we as an organization said we're going to write security rules, and so we're going to look and tell the companies, hey, we're going to take care of your security rules, and the rest of the rules, performance, reliability, we're going to rely on the community. So that's a distinction, that we have a very strong security focus in our rule set.
Cool. I love it. Yeah, I'm definitely going to be checking it out some more. The SonarQube thing is, that is a reality of my current workplace. It sounds like Freddie's as well. Like we already are sort of deeply embedded with SonarQube, and so.
And I think traditional Java is it's a very strong language for them. I think the team, they're a Swiss team, and then they live and breathe Java. So I think Java is one of their core languages. So it's not surprising to me.
Cool. Yeah, thanks.
Semgrep's also really easy to bolt onto CI processes, so you can also sneak it in there.
Yeah, I know what I'm going to be playing with tomorrow. So, all right.
Yeah. Do you have a pet bug that you're tired of seeing in the code base? Write a Semgrep rule for it. Squash it forever.
There's a lot of code in the code base. Yes. All right. Well, just to keep it just a little bit over the hour, I want to say thanks to Daghan, Kurt, and Pablo, and the R2C team for showing us this new shiny tool. It's kind of fun that it's already like seeded with some of the security stuff for the default rules. And yeah, I'll definitely gonna give it a spin tomorrow and see what I can eke out from it. And thanks so much for giving us your time.
Languages inside other languages.
That's so meta.
We'll come back for another meetup, like the meta meetup.
Right. Oh gosh.
There's truly bonkers stuff you can start doing. Like, do you need to start looking for like weird JavaScript inside of like another like HTML templating thing? Semgrep can do that. That's actually one of my recent features. But also, I'm going to start writing PHP rules. So if you have projects like unspeakable eldritch horrors in the corners of your code bases that are PHP, rules are coming for those, because I'm tired of seeing open redirects. So I'm writing a rule for it.
You know what? Like AWS has support for COBOL now, so. Yeah. So go
All
ahead.
right. Well, thank you, Freddie. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for inviting us. You've been
Thank
wonderful.
you.
Thanks, everybody.